Facility archive records searching. Complete, found 19 results for search terms. Patient number 017983. Chronological listings follow. 1. Admission form. Patient number 017983 to November 18, 2005. 1512. Involuntary admittance requested by patient's relatives in response to apparent self-destructive behavior cycle. Self-harm evident in physical exam. Signs of past abrasions on head and neck, apparently due to self-inflicted scratching, and both fresh and partially closed surface lacerations on arms and legs. Signs of extreme fatigue also evident. In examination, patient admitted insomnia for, as quoted, longer than you'd believe. Patient unable to give exact time for length of insomnia, likely due to extended period of insomnia itself. Confusion and moderate delirium evident. Preliminary medication issued, triazolam 0.25 mg for insomnia, topical bacitracin for wound care. 2. Admission evaluation. Patient number 017983 to November 18, 2005. 1656 performed by Dr. Emile Lafayette. Self-harm confirmed. Patient removed dressings from arm lacerations, reopened wound while waiting for interviewer. Definite evidence of somniphobia in patient. Justifications for harm. Patient refers to sleep with anxiety, and consistently acts against self to cause pain in response to lengthy periods of silence or other lack of stimuli. Issue of insomnia needs immediate attention, given evidence of exceedingly prolonged duration. Likewise possible agoraphobia. Patient requests an isolated bed, becomes withdrawn, agitated when request is denied, refuses to cooperate further with interview. Offers vague suggestion of hostile other in justification, but will not elaborate, as quoted, because you're not going to believe she exists until she hurts someone anyway. Evidence for likely paranoid schizophrenia. Recommend further interview with full psychological spectrum testing for exact diagnosis. Final recommendation, admit patient. Preliminary medication issued, cancel triazolam. Instead 5 mg diazepam twice daily for insomnia, anxiety, and probable sleep disorders. 3. Final admittance report. Patient number 017983 to November 18, 2005. 1713 Patient issued bed in room 409. Current occupants, patient number 017802, patient number 017983. Close from admission remanded to family of patient. 3 sets of common dress issued for immediate needs. Further psych eval scheduled for 10 o'clock November 19, 2005, determining future length of stay. 4. Ward event report, November 18, 2005. 1730 during routine new patient room check. Patient number 017802 places request with staff for transfer to, as quoted, some other room. Appears agitated, claims patient number 017983 has been disturbing him. Patient number 017983 likewise requests transfer to isolated bed. Both requests denied. Orderly note, follow-up room check suggested to avoid possible intra-patient conflict. 5. Ward event report, November 18, 2005. 1900 hours follow-up room check. Patient number 017983 claims Dr. Lafayette has ordered him moved to isolation. Patient number 017802 backs claim. Administration records demonstrate no such order. Upon informing room occupants, patient number 017983 attempts to assault staff and patient number 017802 becomes uncontrollably agitated. Additional personnel required to contain incident. Both patients restrained, sedated, forced into early lights out. Orderly note, exercise caution in all future room checks for 409. 6. Ward event report, November 18, 2005. 2357 staff on hall 1, floor 4 report loud sounds from room 409 after facility lights out, disturbing other rooms and patients. Patient number 017983 found awake, extremely agitated and struggling against restraints. Demands lights be turned back on, as quoted, before she comes. Self-sustained injuries to wrists and ankles at points of restraint. Patient attempts to struggle against staff during trade to more comprehensive restraint, requiring additional personnel to contain incident. Additional sedation required for patient number 017983. Patient number 017802 does not respond during course of event, likely due to sedation from earlier incident. Orderly note: maintain restraints on patient number 017983 until further notice. Sedate patient before removing restraints for any reason. Recommend antipsychotic be considered in future psych eval. 7. Ward Event Report, November 19, 2005. 020 Staff on Hall 1. Floor 4 again report loud sounds from room 409. Patient number 017983 found catatonic on floor, with severe self-inflicted scratches on head and neck. Restraints are severed at connection points, with severe bruising on limbs possibly indicating more severe injury at restrained points with patient. Patient number 017802 is found deceased. Severe disfiguring wounds to face, complete with destruction. Orderly note: ingestion of patient's eyes. Move to room 101, locker 2, awaiting autopsy. Patient number 017983 transferred to isolation, room 626, given injected dose of 100 mg zooklopenthixol on attending physician's orders to control acute psychosis. Orderly note: recommend video observation to allow better control of future outbursts. Stay at least an arm's length away from patient upper body restraints at all times, just in case. 8. Autopsy report, patient number 017802 to November 19, 2005. 9:44 performed by Drive, Julius Weed. Ragged lacerations prominent around subject's head and neck, increasing in severity and depth on the regions of the face itself. At several points, the flesh is cut to the bone. More disconcertingly, subject's eyes appear to be violently removed from their sockets and are missing. Cause of death: exsanguination from wounds. Final judgment: homicide. Coroner note: recommend consideration of patient number 017983 as dangerous to staff and facility residents. Urge continued maintenance of restraints and isolation from contact with others in patient population. Also recommend digestive endoscopy to determine fate of missing tissues for staff cohesion purposes. Orderlies from floor 4 suspect cannibalism, promise to refuse isolation shifts until such belief is disproven. 9. Medical report, patient number 017983 to November 19, 2005. 10:07 performed by Dr. Adonis Gale. Patient is cooperative, if withdrawn, during examination. No outbursts or threats. Current drug regimen appears effective. No unusual tissue or objects discovered in digestive endoscopy. Radiology tests discover hairline fractures in tibia, fibula of right leg. Severe abrasions evident on skins of restrained points, also head and neck, necessitating topical treatment. Troubling instability in vitals. BP is acutely elevated, pulse rapid and weak for patient's size. Extended stress from anxiety, elevated mood, and insomnia likely cause. Physician note: patient must sleep to begin recovery process. Recommend elevated dosage of diazepam to encourage this result. Firm contact point restraints not recommended for this patient due to risk of further injury. Full body restraint must be considered as alternative. 10. Psychiatric evaluation, patient number 017983 to November 19, 2005. 10:39 performed by Dr. George Tully. Definite evidence indicating disassociation of identity from actions. Patient expresses remorse for death of patient number 017802, yet refuses to admit responsibility for actions in said event, instead externalizes blame into antagonistic female other. Same figure, apparently referenced in prior evaluation, seems to be central actor in patient's paranoid psychosis. Behavior and actions of said other justified through magical thinking, despite recognition of depicted individuals' illogically defined capabilities to sustain reported antagonism, as quoted, "I don't know, you don't know, and she doesn't care." Patient requests observation of room be terminated, grows agitated when request is denied, makes threats, refuses to continue interview. Diagnosis: paranoid schizophrenia manifesting in somnophobia, violent psychosis, and dissociative episodes. Medication issued, up dosage for diazepam to 10 mg twice daily. On November 24, 2005 begin issuing 2.5 mg doses of haloperidol twice daily for psychosis. Interviewer note: utilize patient observation protocols and ward rounds to check for possible drug interaction effects. Follow up immediately if found or on November 30, 2005 otherwise. 11. Ward Event Report, November 19, 2005 14:32 During standard rounds patient number 017983 requests that observation of room be terminated, warns staff of perceived threat inherent in observation protocol. When request is denied, begins struggling against restraints and screaming warnings to staff. Observation camera operator regarding dissociative, antagonistic other. Acting physician note: reject recommendations from orderlies to sedate patient number 017983 unless medically or procedurally sound. Sedatives are not a safety blanket. Orderly note: they say this guy is at his sedative limit, and he was nearly pulling his bed off its bolts. Use double staff if at all possible when dealing with him, whatever's in his head. It's strong. 12. Staff Communications, November 19, 2005 16:53 From Charles McKinney, Head of Patient Care Division TO, Patient Care Staff List Subject, RE-FWD Patient number 017983 This has officially gone far enough. I did not intervene in this matter before, because I was under the impression that the men and women under my supervision were beyond such things as this. But circumstances have proven me to be mistaken, and I will not allow these rumors to progress any further. The only thing wrong with patient number 017983 is that he is seriously ill and dependent upon us for care and assistance in his recovery. He is not the first patient with explosive episodes we have treated. He is not even the only one currently in our facility, and he will not be the last. It thus pains me to discover that one singular breach of safety, which was properly addressed by facility protocol, has left my staff whispering superstitions to one another and accepting the delusions of our patient as truth. We are better than this. There are indeed risks inherent in this profession, risks we all knew about upon assuming it. But that is the burden we bear to render aid to those who find themselves in our beds. Until otherwise noted, I will not approve of any shift changes from scheduled isolation hours. Our staff counselors are always available during standard hours for those who need to consult with someone in light of the recent event and associated workplace anxiety. It is a fringe benefit of working in mental health, and I suggest anyone having difficulties make use of it. This matter is closed, and I want to hear no further mention of it. As previously stated, I expected more from all of you. Charles 13, Ward Event Report, November 19, 2005 20:44 During standard rounds patient number 017983 requests that lights be left on after scheduled lights out time. After consultation with attending physician and therapist, request granted. Room check proceeds uneventfully until staff move to depart, at which point request is made for observation to be terminated. Upon denial of request, patient instead requests for lights to be doused as usual. Request granted. Another request is made, now for red bulb sleep lights to be doused during scheduled lights out time. Patient understands that low-level light is necessary for room observation, as quoted. That's why I want them off. Warns observation camera operator against her. Attending therapist denies request. Sorry Jacob. 14. Staff Communications, November 19, 2005 21:12 From Dr. Emile Lafayette TO, Patient Care Staff List Subject, Lights in 626 I happened to notice tonight while in final checks that the sleep lights in isolation 626 were turned off after standard rounds, without my knowledge or consent. As I am sure you are all aware, this is a severe breach of facility protocol. When video observation of a patient is recommended and approved, there is a reason for such a decision to be made. Patient number 017983 has violent episodes and must be monitored to minimize the risk of him causing further harm to his already precarious physical state. You have absolutely no authority to override decisions made by the medical personnel of this, or any other, facility. None. I have been hearing talk around the halls that some of you are afraid of this man. He is bound to a bed, under the highest sedation we can medically provide, and both physically and mentally suffering from acute fatigue. Do you also jump at shadows? Regardless of the reason, I will not permit untrained orderlies to begin interfering in the care provided to our patients. If such an event occurs again, I will inform Mr. McKinney and see the entire night's orderly staff barred from the premises. Do I make myself clear? Dr. Emile Lafayette MD, FACEP, MHSC 15, Ward Event Report, November 19, 2005 23:27, patient number 017983, name redacted, won't stop screaming, it just won't stop. Hours of it. It echoes in my ears, in my skull. Whenever he's coherent he begs us to turn the camera off, or the lights off, or just make everything go away. I'm sorely tempted. Poor, software censored. But Doc Lafayette pulled Jacob from observation and is watching everyone from the video room for the rest of his shift thanks to Michael's business with the lights earlier. Last I saw of him, he was headed for the elevator with his jacket saying he just can't do this to my kids. I don't know why I'm here anymore. I just keep staring up at the cameras. Is that, software censored, busier watching his patient, or us? I'd only need one needle to stop the screaming. 16. Ward Event Report, November 20, 2005 001. It stopped. Just stopped. No one's willing to check why. I think, patient number 017983, name redacted, is gone. I pray she is gone. 17. Staff Communications, November 20, 2005 004 from, Drive, Emile Lafayette TO, all subject. Patient number 017983. Again I said no one is to enter isolation 626 without my express permission. God, software censored, you all. I will have all your jobs FO rocket. I will be good mommy please not the belt. Please help me 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 saving help me help me help me PMA help me 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 kill me help 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 me talk me help me help me help me help me help me. He is dead, I am dead, she is dead, we are dead, and we all fall down. 18. Admission Evaluation, patient number 017986 to November 20, 2005 9:25 performed by Dr. George Tulling. Former staff. Patient discovered in locked observation room setting fire to equipment and recordings. Attempted suicide in flames before rescue by staff. Claims to be antagonized by same female other as former patient number 017983. Possibly involved in death of said resident. If so, evidence obvious for disassociation of self from actions. Likely paranoid schizophrenia. Patient will not respond to further questions, as quoted. Don't go looking for her. She'll find you. Final recommendation, admit patient. Preliminary medication issued, 2.5 mg doses of haloperidol twice daily for schizophrenic psychosis. 19. Staff Communications, November 20, 2005 9:36 from, Dr. George Tulling T.O., Charles McKinney, Head of Patient Care Division. Subject, I've just heard. Seal him in isolation. Wait her out. Cremate both bodies. As far as the relatives are concerned, patient number 017983 died in the fire set by Lafayette in committing suicide. That's all anyone needs to know. Let's just hope the rest of us don't wind up needing time in these beds as well. This was found on /x/ by forums member Pasta Lover, so the author is unknown. If you are or know of the original author, please contact me if you wish to have credit or want the story removed. People watching, this is a story from work. I work at a mall, and I work nights. It's pretty well known, so in the interest of not breaking any non-disclosure agreements, I'm not going to name it. I don't think sharing any of this is technically illegal, but I'm sure my mall wouldn't appreciate me sharing any of this. Our mall has over 90 different shops spread across different levels and has a huge fountain in the plaza. Most of the stores are big chains that operate out of outlets or smaller kiosks. They range from clothing stores, to outdoorsy stuff, to pizza places, and there's also a movie theater. I've been working at this mall for over 5 years now in security and surveillance, but I've only been working the graveyard shift for the past 8 months, and the way that I got my current job, being the lady who watches the cameras in the dead of night, is also a little unusual. My job has the highest turnover rate. That's not weird. I work long hours in the dead of night and I come home very early, usually midnight to 7 in the morning. But there are times when the lady doing 5 in the afternoon to midnight will ask me to switch with her because she has a date. Part of the reason people quit here so often is because usually I don't have the luxury of dating or socializing at normal hours. I go to work around 11 at night and I don't get back until about 8 in the morning. Many people have had my job before but opted out because they wanted a social life of some kind. The pay is pretty good for my education level, and I don't have any better options lined up, plus I have full benefits. I've worked here for a long time and I get more perks than most. Also, my job isn't particularly dangerous since I watch cameras and don't patrol anything, and I don't work alone. I know the system better than most, and it doesn't involve manual labor. In short, my job is mentally draining but not physically involved or very risky. Before this, I was working day shift which had more people, but it was still the job of watching cameras. A lot of us watching the cameras here tend to be women. I'm not sure if it's a quirk of our particular mall, or if they're really trying to get brownie points for hiring women. It's probably because there are cameras in our changing rooms to keep people from shoplifting. And being that we have a lot of ladies' clothing stores, I assume women would feel better having another woman watching them through the fisheye lens than some random guy, to keep the weirdos out. There are security guards who check in with me and some of them are pretty funny. Our favorite thing to do in the dead of night is to pretend that we're spies on a secret mission. I'm the one feeding them intel, having taken control of the system with my amazing hacking skills, and they're the secret agents. We try to have fun. My call sign is Lady Liberty. And the story behind that is the security guards hazed me the first night I took over the monitors, barging in on me to give me a jump scare wearing ski masks from the sporting goods store, and all I had to defend myself was a book and flashlight. The guys I work with are night blind and radio silence. The ladies I work with in the control room are Big Ben and Hungry Eyes. I can't say I know the people working in the stores themselves except for occasional food vendors, but I do know some of my bosses since I used to work days. The real problem with this job is the monotony and boredom can play tricks on your mind. The other problem is that incidents at night are usually of a scary variety. Occasionally kids will break in to vandalize things, or we deal with trespassing homeless people or sometimes the elderly or people with mental issues. I don't deal with them myself, but seeing a stranger in the mall after hours feels like watching a home invasion from a panic room. A small aside, Night Blind got that call sign when he was patrolling and couldn't see very well, and I got a front row seat to watching him stumble into the fountain in the main plaza thoroughfare. Radio Silence got his name when he wouldn't check in at the scheduled intervals, only to find out later that he'd left his walkie-talkie in the security booth. Hungry Eyes got her call sign from the song that's her ringtone. She always has a boyfriend calling her at work. I hear the song Hungry Eyes at least twice every night. Big Ben literally can't shut up about the time. What time is it? Is her catchphrase at this point. Sometimes she's like the time channel, reminding us what time it is or how many minutes or hours until we leave. Usually it's informing us what time we need to check in, or just mentioning the exact hour. She's always wearing a watch. If I'm honest, we're bored and probably what you would consider unprofessional. We sometimes get called in by the bosses because we're also monitored by security cameras. The only thing more boring and unsettling than watching empty rooms is watching the one you're in already. Big Ben and Hungry Eyes work alongside me, and sometimes we work in shifts. I'd say we're all a little weird in different ways. Working nights for months means finding something interesting to do is a challenge. When nothing happens for 6 hours, you make up games or projects for yourself. Counting tiles on the floor or ceiling, having saltine eating contests, trying to scare night blind and radio silence with our creepiest voices, or softly singing nursery rhymes in the creepiest way possible. Boredom and morbid curiosity are the enemy here, as annoying as it is to hear Hungry Eyes ringtone. I'm jealous she has something to do that's fun, like talking to the flavor of the month. This story is really about the videotape though. This is how I found it. We have a break room and it has a TV with a VCR, because, for some reason, we never made it over to the modern age even when there's an electronics department in the mall. We're really just glad that it's a color TV, even though our TV is a square behemoth on a dusty black dolly you can wheel around like they do at schools. There isn't much to do for fun aside from the movies on VHS, basic cable which is usually late night infomercials, or if you happen to read a book. Sometimes I wheel the TV out because the break room is boring and claustrophobic. We have a handful of Disney movies, The Wizard of Oz, and old reruns of MASH recorded unprofessionally. Be kind, rewind is a way of life. One day, I was bored and decided I'd look in the archives room for any other tapes. It was a stupid idea. It's probably illegal and I know I'm being taped. I didn't read anything in the files. That's almost definitely a fireable offense. I opened drawers on the filing cabinet, ran my fingers down the line to see if any VHS-like shapes were visible. No luck, and then I'd close it. Board, pull, check, nada, push. Rinse and repeat. As I was going, the frantic boredom of it was making me pull drawers open and slam them closed harder than I should have. As I got to the bottom of one filing cabinet tower, I pulled it out so hard that I actually pulled the drawer out of the cabinet and nearly dropped it on my toe. It crashed with a loud metallic boom that nearly scared the shit out of me. It was a lot like trying to sneak in around while your parents are asleep. Everything is the loudest sound. At once, Big Ben came rushing in to see if I was okay. Thankfully I was already Lady Liberty at this point, otherwise I might have been noisemaker by the end of the night. I was a little bashful as I tried to explain that I was fine, though it came out as a joke, saying that I was bitten by a radioactive spider and couldn't control my super strength. Big Ben rolled her eyes, reminded me of the time, and went to help me put the drawer back. It was then that we were crouched over that we saw the VHS tape. It was a standard VHS tape that was placed in the back of the cabinet tower. We only barely saw it, an odd shape in the back of the tower standing upright with black and white. In a way it reminded me of the drawers in my kitchen, and that sometimes some utensil would get stuck behind the drawers and I'd have to pull one completely out to get back in there. Except that this wasn't a dish towel or a spatula. I was more excited by the VHS tape than skeptical. I didn't care how it got there. It felt like I had just discovered buried treasure. The original label on it had been scratched away and a new one had been placed over it, unevenly. It read the greatest hits of the 40s. I didn't know exactly what that meant. Maybe it was music? Maybe it was a movie marathon? I didn't know how much film was on the tape or how long it would be. Big Ben and I shrugged and took the tape because we had nothing better to do and put the drawer back in place. At worst, we'd probably listen to a lot of Ella Fitzgerald. There are worse things. Maybe it was Snow White. We didn't have that movie. We went back. Hungry Eyes looked at us like we were crazy and half-interestedly lowered her phone. One of us rolled out the TV and tried to set up the VCR. "What are you doing?" "We're going to watch the greatest hits of the 40s. I said it, holding up the videotape, showing it off with a mockingly celebratory shake, sort of the same motion you do when screwing in a light bulb. "What, is that like, porn?" "Yeah. We're going to watch Judy rub her garland." Big Ben rolled her eyes and started to rewind the tape. She checked her watch briefly and then pulled up a chair as I tried to get it all set up. "I think the tape started at the beginning, be kind, rewind and all." But I admit I didn't check or hesitate before I just hit play. Fuzzy white lines occasionally rolled up the screen and back down like tides of foam in the ocean. "I'll call you back, sweetie. The girls and I are going to watch Granny Port." Hungry Eyes laughed into her phone and then gave a jokingly scandalized tone to something her boyfriend must have said. "No, I'm not going to take pictures." She hung up on him, still laughing as she scooted closer to the TV screen, just like how our parents used to tell us would ruin our eyes. The first 10 minutes of the tape were actually not bad. It was almost disarmingly pleasant. It was an old-timey nostalgia, black screen and stuffy live introductory trumpet music that felt awkwardly imposed. Think trumpets introducing royalty or Caesar, and it's that kind of music, only for 2 or 3 seconds. I half expected a lion to start roaring or an FBI warning. We'd stumbled into a recording of a Bing Crosby Christmas album or something like it. Christmas songs continued and we were enraptured by the novelty of it, even though it was only September. The tape would periodically go to other singers, but it was spliced badly with a few of the ending notes cut off as if the recording had been imprecise. I realized this wasn't an official copy very early on. Halfway through a Frank Sinatra song is when it started. I've watched it twice now. The first time I was so dumbstruck but curious that I didn't even know what to do or say as we watched, completely ignoring the cameras. These are my basic notes on the second viewing. They're mostly word for word from my notes, but they're not as professional as they should be. My notes on each segment are written in the order they appeared, but I don't really know why they're in the order they are. The Sinatra song abruptly cuts off and we see a familiar sight. And we, myself, Big Ben, and Hungry Eyes, know it's familiar because it's shots from our mall's security cameras. We recognize the plaza instantly. The first video on the tape is dated August 11th, 1989. The camera says it's 3:52 a.m. It's the main thoroughfare in the fountain where Night Blind had fallen in. I remember there was an awkward and unsettling realization that this was our mall. We didn't say anything then. It was unnerving, but that went away when we saw the first video segment in the queue. It's the plaza, and there's the fountain. There's an older woman who's on screen by the fountain. She's a little pudgy and wearing an unfashionable grandma-style one-piece swimsuit with frills of a lighter fabric at the waist. It's the kind of swimsuit that only really looks good on a little girl or an old lady, the kind that looks part wetsuit, part ballerina tutu. She's wearing a swimmer's cap and goggles. She has a towel draped over her shoulders. She's as giddy as a small child. She coyly pokes her foot into the water of the fountain and gives a theatrical shiver like a cartoon character. The fountain isn't more than 2 feet deep and I'm afraid that the woman is about to do a cannonball and break her hip or something. Instead, she confidently steps into the water, which is only up to her shins or thighs. Then, like she's a vaudeville dancer, she shimmies through the fountain using the towel like a dancer would a feather boa, pulling it back and forth in her shimmy in a kind of flossing movement. She rhythmically kicks and splashes the water, as if it's a musical number. And then she turns coy again, like she's performing this routine in front of a crowd, and turns her back on the crowd, walking back the way she came, giving rhythmic and exaggerated hip sways. Her routine continues for over 4 minutes, though it doesn't look like it's unpracticed. Finally, the old woman takes off the towel she's been wearing at a boa and tosses it lovingly to her adoring public, which lands in the water, before blowing a kiss and waving at absolutely no one. With an exaggerated flop, she lets herself lean backwards and a huge splash scene before the video cuts out. Throughout the first video, we'd been laughing and giggling to ourselves. It was amazing to see someone having so much fun, even if it was probably considered trespassing. The three of us are still controlling our giggle fits when we check in with radio silence, because Big Ben reminded us it was time to do it. We can hardly contain our laughter when we tell him to be on the lookout for an old woman in the fountain. Big Ben has to explain it's an inside joke he wouldn't get when the next video comes on. These seem lighthearted, and the fact that it's our mall no longer gives us an eerie feeling. Instead, it's more of a conspiratorial "this is our mall, we know where that happened" kind of thrill. When I was younger I used to be terrified of my wardrobe, to the point I spent as little time in my bedroom as possible. We used to live in the house next door until I was about 3. But then the little old lady who lived in our current house died and the house was put on the market, for a very good price. My parents bought it because they loved the road, and the garden was bigger and the view over the fields out the back was better. I don't remember moving in. I just remember wanting to move back because I didn't want to sleep in my room. My older brother teased me that the lady died in my bedroom, and my parents have never told me otherwise. I do, however, remember being terrified of my wardrobe. It had been in my room when we moved in, so it became my wardrobe. My dad sprayed it hot pink to make it girly to go with my pale purple walls. My mom painted flowers on my wall to try to get me to like my room. I got a disco ball and funky Disney night lights to try to get me to sleep without building a duvet fort each night. My granny knitted me a friendly dragon, and told me he was magic and at night he would wake up and eat all of the monsters. For my 7th birthday, they bought me a tortoise, and his house was put in my bedroom, so any noise could be blamed on him. But no matter what they did I was terrified of my room, and most of all that wardrobe. I never once opened the doors. I was terrified, I thought at the time, for a very good reason. I was convinced the old lady's ghost lived in the wardrobe. And I had evidence. There was a demon shape in the sprayed paint. It always had a shadow around it, and I could always hear stuff coming from it. Scratching and shuffling, and I was sure the door used to scuff open and shut during the night. I always thought it was good evidence. I was told to not be silly and sent back to bed. Obviously, as I grew up I began to think that they were right and I had been silly because, A, the likelihood of there being something in my wardrobe was impossible, and B, she was a lovely old lady and obviously wouldn't be a ghost in a wardrobe. When I was 15 my parents built an extension and I moved to a different room. My old bedroom became a room where we just dumped boxes. Now, about 3 weeks ago I returned from university. I'm a secondary school history teacher now. I couldn't have a job where rational thinking and logic, or dullness depending on one's opinion, is more prevalent. I'll be bringing back a lot of work to Mark, so my parents have said that I can convert the box room, my old bedroom, into my office. So, I've spent the last few weeks clearing the boxes and throwing things out. It has taken me weeks, but I have finally reached the wardrobe, which is in the corner furthest from the door. Today was the day I was going to clear all of my old clothes out of it, clean it and fill it with my new suits. There was no stirring of any emotion as I went over to it. Nothing as I opened my curtains on that side of the room and grabbed a bag for rubbish and one for charity. I was quite merrily clearing it out for about 10 minutes, with some good dance music on in the background. For a while anyway. I scratched my hand on a broken coat hanger, and stopped and stood back. Me being me I swore at the wardrobe and stood back to tell it off. And then I noticed them. All up the inside of the doors are deep scratches, always 3 aligned. As if something scratched the door again and again and again, trying to get out. "7 years ago, I was teaching English in Japan. The school where I taught was an older building, about 80 years old. It was a smaller school with only 200 students. It had 10 classrooms, an office and a small cafeteria that also served as a gym. There was another classroom room 4 that was used as a storage room. It was a nice school and served its purpose for the village town. My first week there was uneventful, but on my second week, I was there late one night prepping assignments for the next day. There was only the janitor and me in the building. As I was making copies in the office, I heard what sounded like sobbing. I called out to the janitor, but got no answer. He spoke English. Maybe a student got locked in, I thought. I decided to go check it out, and when I stepped into the hallway, I noticed that the crying seemed to be getting louder and was coming from the direction of room 4. "Hello?" I called out, but nobody answered. I slowly approached room 4 and opened the door. Just as I opened it, the crying stopped. I reached for the light switch and turned it on. I quickly scanned the room and realized it was empty. I was badly shaken at this point, So I quickly gathered my things and ran out of the school, not even telling the janitor I was leaving. The crying continued throughout my year-long tenure. Eventually, I grew immune to the disembodied cries. But on my last week teaching, something changed. I was there late one night and I had to use the ladies' room. After I was done using the toilet, I opened the stall door and was startled to see a young Japanese woman standing there with her face to the mirror. I called out to her, but got no response. I decided to look into the mirror to see if I recognized her, and what I saw still haunts me to this day. When I looked into the mirror, I saw that the woman had no face. I quickly ran out of the bathroom screaming. A year later, I was talking to another English teacher from the school. Somehow we got on the subject of ghosts, then I told her about my experience. Then, she told me a story. About 15 years ago, there was a young female teacher who fell in love with a male teacher. He was married and had no intentions of leaving his wife. Distraught, the young teacher locked herself in room 4 and hung herself. So the story goes, even in death, the young teacher still cries for the man she never had. The story that you are about to hear really happened to me on September 5, 2012, at 3:40 a.m. About 4 months after my mother unexpectedly succumbed to a bout of pneumonia at the raw age of 45, I will never forget the time nor date of the horrifying experience for which I am about to share. My mother had always had numerous health issues in the years before her death. I was always bringing her to and from various doctor's appointments, treatment centers, and hospitals. I was happy and willing to do this, because not only did I love her because she was my mother, I loved her because she was my best friend, someone that I could talk to for hours and tell anything and everything to. The very last time that I took her to the hospital on June 5 of 2012, I was in complete denial. I was in denial despite my mother complaining of how hard it was for her to breathe. I was in denial despite the fact that her normally beautiful bright and lively green eyes were dull, dark and glazed, and I know now that I was in blinding denial when my mother turned to me as we were just arriving to the emergency room and said to me in a disturbingly labored whisper, "Amber, I'm really scared." I never fathomed that that would be the final thing that she would say to me. I now know what someone looks like when they realize that they are about to die, and those final words in her petrified expression will forever haunt me. Honestly, the next couple of months for me following my mother's death were a blur, almost non-existent. The viewing, funeral, and condolences from friends, family and strangers did not seem real or surreal, as weird as that sounds. I numbed my aching pain as so many other grievers tend to do. I drank a lot of alcohol, I ate opiates and benzos like Skittles, and I wallowed in my own self-pity and depression. Most days my husband would come home to find all of the blinds drawn in me, locked away in my bathroom, sometimes days at a time in complete darkness. My family let me grieve in my own way for a little while and then decided that it was time to intervene. I am grateful that they did, because I sometimes wonder how long I would have remained in the dark sort of limbo, being neither here nor there, simply wasting away into bitterness and grief. It was at the very beginning of September when I finally started to breathe again. I guess I was just starting the beginning stages of the healing process after losing someone so unexpectedly, after losing a piece of myself which I knew, and had come to accept I would never get back. During this time my husband had to travel for business for a couple of days. He was very reluctant to leave me, but I reassured him that I would be fine. Anyways, I secretly wanted a little time to myself. I was excited to settle down that night with a bottle of Che Blanc Chardonnay, a good book, and a scorching hot bath. After these much-needed indulgences I decided that it was time to retire for the evening. It was, after all, already 2 in the morning and I remember having a slight, yet bothersome headache. I hated going to bed because it always seemed like as soon as I laid down, thoughts of her would begin to flood my brain. Her face, her voice, her laughter, her smile, anything and everything having to do with her always tormented me at night. On this particular night, however, it seemed a lot worse than usual. I battled with myself as to whether I should pop one of my prescribed sleeping pills. I tossed and turned, turned and tossed. That night, no matter what I did, or how hard I prayed for peace, peace just would not come. I still wonder, no, actually pray that on that night I was actually asleep and that it was all just a horribly vivid nightmare. I try to justify my experience with these hopes, but, I tell you my friends, what happened that night seemed very, very real. I specifically remember looking at my bedside clock, which read 3:44 a.m., and wondering when, if ever, would I actually fall asleep? I turned my attention away from the clock to the television, and in that moment began to smell something like a burnt match, sulfuric, which I thought odd. Before I began debating to myself whether I should get up to see where the smell was coming from, I began to have a very strange, almost pleasant tingling sensation in my feet, lower legs and thighs. This sensation then began to travel up to my pelvic area, lower abdomen, and chest. Seconds after questioning the smell and the physical sensations, my bedside alarm clock began to blare, 3:44, blinking at me furiously in bright red. This, of course, startled me, and as I reached over to turn off the alarm, I was literally pushed into my mattress with such a force that I was unable to move any part of my body. The mattress literally began to sink in around me, as if I were as heavy as a block of cement. The worst part was that I could not even scream. I was paralyzed from head to toe. The only thing that I could move were my eyes, yet I could not close them. Suddenly an even stranger feeling came over me. My entire body began to literally vibrate. I could even hear this vibration in my ears. The sound was almost deafening. Terrified, I looked around and then suddenly saw my mother. She was straddling my body, wearing a white hospital gown with little blue shapes all over it. I am sure you know what I am talking about. It is the same gown that any hospital provides to admitted patients. The very same type of gown she was wearing when the fluid in her lungs continued to build. The very gown she wore when she was removed from life support. And as silly as it sounds, this is one thing I have always remembered about her death. Her final moments spent in that dirty fucking hospital gown. She was straddling me, but she was not facing me. She was facing away from me in the opposite direction, facing my television, which was still on just like it was before. I could not see her face because her dark curly brown hair hung loosely in a tangled mess, covering it up on all sides. On top of my TV I could see the time on the table box clearly, proclaiming it was 3:45 a.m. The span of 1 minute truly felt like an eternity. I knew without a doubt that whatever this was pure evil, and it was trying to impersonate my mother. The terror that I felt began to well up in my throat, yet I could not make a sound. The vibrations got stronger as it slowly began to turn its head, its neck cracking violently as it did so, to face me. In my head I began to say the Lord's Prayer and beg for whatever this thing was to leave me in the name of Jesus Christ. After repeating this several times in my head, there was a strange whooshing, popping noise, and the vibrations ceased. I sprung up in bed, gasping for air and clutching my throat. Sweat and tears rolled down my face. Needless to say, I did not sleep at all that night or for the next couple of weeks. I love and miss my mother dearly. I know that if she ever decided to come to me in spirit, it would be a beautiful experience. That is why I know that whatever the thing was that came to visit me that night was not my mother at all. But I do know that it was pure evil. I can say this because I felt it. I felt the evil just like you can feel or touch any tangible object. It was there. I still have nightmares about this experience. I hope and pray that I never again have a false reunion. And from the fog they come, to find the souls of children to claim. The eldritch words of my grandfather, Ullis, which are part of a lullaby he often sang to me before I would fall asleep as a child, still echo through my mind from time to time. I still find it hard to forget the story, that of which the lullaby tells, especially around a certain time of year. The particular part of the year in which the nights grow cold and the frost clings to the fallen leaves of trees. The time of year that the fog rolls in and encloses around everything in your sight until you feel as if you are trapped in your own minuscule world. No matter where you go, though I am a man of over 20 years today, I still remember in full sense what a haunting feeling the fog would bring to me as a child each year. In fact, I don't think any number of aging years would allow for this fear that I still retain to subside one bit. The fog is still a horrific sight to me, and I still find it hard to get a good night's sleep during the frigid winter months of each passing year. I reside still in the house I was raised in. It is a farmhouse of 3 stories that sits in the center of the rural property of 10 acres that has been passed down by my family through many generations since my ancestors' immigration to this country. The house itself is connected to the nearest public road by a long, dusty gravel driveway. Since I was a young lad, I have since noticed more and more that there is a strange ambience about the acres of orchards that surround my home, something eerily strange and utterly weird that I still have not yet come to understand about the nature of things around this place. The trees are the same as I was a child, as is the vegetation that grows throughout. Even the birds I see fluttering about, as well as the critters I see scurrying along the ground, are all strangely familiar in appearance to those of which I witnessed as a child. It is as if everything here is undying or is unaltered by time itself. I wouldn't expect anyone to believe such an unnatural concept such as this, and I have a hard time wrapping my head around it as well. Hell, if I hadn't cared to research the place of my residence throughout my years of life here, I probably wouldn't have even noticed. What I've come to know about the grounds on which my house was built and the property surrounding is frightening. It does however give me some insight on the strange family lullaby Alice used to sing to me. It has been a family tradition, by a dozen generations past, that the grandfather of the eldest born son of his own son must sing to the child the lullaby so that the grandchild will then sing it for his siblings and eventually his own grandson. The tradition is an odd one to explain to others, yes, but I once remember Alice telling me of the importance of the song. The lullaby itself is supposed to put the child to sleep, as most lullabies are intended to do, as well as protect the sleeping child's dreams. The latter of course made no sense to me as a child, though its importance is clear to me now. The song itself goes exactly like this: Little one, fall asleep, if you want your soul to keep. If not, then they will knock, not once but twice, softly in the foggy night. For from the fog they come, to find the souls of children to claim. Those words, coupled with the melody, is what makes the lullaby complete and the magic real. I say magic because it is truly a spell that enchants the children of my family and allows for them to fall into deep, peaceful slumbers, protecting their innocent souls. This song must be sung, lest their souls be stolen by the force of supernatural entities, demons. It does sound crazy, yes, but it has been learned to me out of my free will to learn that the house in which I live today was erected atop an archaic burial ground of a primitive people of old, the acres surrounding housing the lost spirits of fallen warriors from battles old and forgotten to most recorded history. Though thanks to the globalizing phenomenon that is the internet, I was able to shed some light on the history of not only my own heritage, but of the lands on which my family has resided for generations. This has given me answers of a great many questions I have pondered over the course of my life. It explains the trees that do not die, the shadows and shapes that sometimes seem to shift and obscure before my eyes as if I am a schizophrenic, and the 2 raspy knocks on my window I once heard as a child the night that Alice had died, as no lullaby was sung to me that night. Demons at my window that I dared not open at all that dreadful foggy night. I have never nor will I ever speak to any one of the knocks I once heard in my bed as a wee one, for I fear, though I do not know for certain of course, that doing so will break such a grounded tradition and shatter the ritual of my family that keeps our own children safe, for I wish not for any children of my family in the present or future to ever witness the horrible knocking on their window pane. It was a traumatic experience for myself and has its effects to this day, as I accredit most blame for my insomnia during the winter months to that one uncanny occurrence. I often find myself cursing such demons in my mind as I lay in bed on cold nights. How much praying will it take to save my poor soul before I die? I will surely never know. Message begins. We made a mistake. That is the simple, undeniable truth of the matter, however painful it might be. The flaw was not in our observatories, for those machines were as perfect as we could make, and they showed us only the unfiltered light of truth. The flaw was not in the predictor, for it is a device of pure, infallible logic, turning raw data into meaningful information without the taint of emotion or bias. No, the flaw was within us, the orchestrators of this disaster, the sentients who thought themselves beyond such failings. We are responsible. It began a short while ago, as these things are measured, less than 660 ago, though I suspect our systems of measure will mean very little by the time anyone receives this transmission. We detected faint radio signals from a blossoming intelligence 214 deals outward from the galactic core, as photons travel. At first crude and unstructured, these leaking broadcasts quickly grew in complexity and strength, as did the messages they carried. Through our observatories we watched a world of strife and violence, populated by a barbaric race of short-lived, fast-breeding vermin. They were brutal and uncultured things which stabbed and shot and burned each other with no regard for life or purpose. Even their concepts of art spoke of conflict and pain. They divided themselves according to some bizarre cultural patterns and set their every industry to cause of death. They terrified us. But we were older and wiser and so very far away, so we did not fret. Then we watched them split the atom and breach the heavens within the breadth of one of their single, short generations, and we began to worry. When they began actively transmitting messages and greetings into space, we felt fear and horror. Their transmissions promised peace and camaraderie to any who were listening, but we had watched them for too long to buy into such transparent deceptions. They knew we were out here, and they were coming for us. The orchestrators consulted the predictor, and the output was dire. They would multiply and grow and flood out of their home system like some uncountable tide of devourer worms, consuming all that lay in their path. It might take 6-8 deals, but they would destroy us if left unchecked. With aching carapaces we decided to act, and sealed our fate. The gift of mercy was 8 strides long with a mouth 2/4 that in diameter, filled with many 4 weights of machinery, fuel, and ballast. It would push itself up to 2/8 of light speed with its onboard fuel, and then begin to consume interstellar primary element 2/2 to feed its unlimited acceleration. It would be traveling at nearly light speed when it hit. They would never see it coming. Its launch was a day of mourning, celebration, and reflection. The horror of the act we had committed weighed heavily upon us all. The necessity of our crime did little to comfort us. The gift had barely cleared the outer cometary halo when the mistake was realized. But it was too late. The gift could not be caught, could not be recalled or diverted from its path. The architects and work crews, horrified at the awful power of the thing upon which they labored, had quietly self-terminated in droves, walking unshielded into radiation zones, neglecting proper no-pressure safety or simple ceasing their nutrient consumption until their metabolic functions stopped. The appalling cost in lives had forced the orchestrators to streamline the gift's design and construction. There had been no time for the design or implementation of anything beyond the simple, massive engines and the stabilizing systems. We could only watch in shame and horror as the light of genocide faded into infrared against the distant void. They grew, and they changed. In a handful of lifetimes they abolished war, abandoned their violent tendencies and turned themselves to the grand purposes of life and art. We watched them remake first themselves, and then their world. Their frail, soft bodies gave way to gleaming metals and plastics. They unified their people through an omnipresent communications grid and produced art of such power and emotion, the likes of which the galaxy has never seen before. Or again, because of us. They converted their home world into a paradise, by their standards, and many 10/6 of them poured out into the surrounding system with a rapidity and vigor that we could only envy, with bodies built to survive every environment from the day-lit surface of their innermost world, to the atmosphere of their largest gas giant and the cold void in between. They set out to sculpt their system into something beautiful. At first we thought them simple miners, stripping the rocky planets and moons for vital resources, but then we began to see the purpose to their constructions, the artworks carved into every surface, and traced across the system in glittering lights and dancing fusion trails. And still, our terrible gift approached. They had less than 2 daily to see it, following so closely on the tail of its own light. In that time, oh so brief even by their fleeting lives, more than 10 tense ancients prepared for death. Lovers exchanged last words, separated by worlds and the tyranny of light speed. Their planet-side engineers worked frantically to build sufficient transmission infrastructure to upload the countless masses with the necessary neural modifications, while those above dumped lifetimes of music and literature from their databanks to make room for passengers. Those lacking the required hardware or the time to acquire it consigned themselves to death, lashed out in fear and pain, or simply went about their lives as best they could under the circumstances. The gift arrived suddenly, the light of its impact visible in our skies, shining bright and cruel even to the unaugmented ocular receptor. We watched and we wept for our victims, dead so many deals before the light of their doom had even reached us. Many 6/4 of those who had been directly or even tangentially involved in the creation of the gift sealed their spiracles with paste as a final penance for the small roles they had played in this atrocity. The light dimmed, the dust cleared, and our observatories refocused upon the place where their shining blue world had once hung in the void, and found only dust and the pale gleam of an orphaned moon, wrapped in a thin, burning wisp of atmosphere that had once belonged to its parent. Radiation and relativistic shrapnel had wiped out much of the inner system, and continent-sized chunks of molten rock carried screaming ghosts outward at interstellar escape velocities, damned to wander the great void for an eternity. The damage was apocalyptic, but not complete. From the shadows of the outer world, tiny points of light emerged, thousands of fusion trails of single ships and world ships and everything in between, many 10-6s of survivors in flesh and steel and memory banks, ready to rebuild. For a few moments we felt belief, even joy, and we were filled with the hope that their culture and art would survive the terrible blow he had dealt them. Then came the message, tightly focused at our star, transmitted simultaneously by hundreds of their ships. "We know you are out there, and we are coming for you." Message ends. Joan Blake lay fast asleep in her bed. The dust from the early sunset floated around the room, being penetrated through the scarlet curtains. She awoke at 6:20 am, rolled out of bed and pulled the curtains open. The sun rested just above the houses on the street opposite. Joan seized the opportunity for a photo. She threw on some clothes, walked down the stairs, grabbed her disposable camera from the table at the bottom of the stairs and walked out of the front door. Her house being at the beginning of the road, she was in the perfect position to get a good snap at the sunrise. Looking through the lens, she saw the empty pavement, the houses on the opposite street and the gorgeous sunset. With no one around, she took the pictures with no interruption. Walking back into the house, she fed her dog, dusted the mantelpieces and then decided to get the photos developed. With still nobody around, she put a coat on and left for the local printing shop. Walking home, she held the envelope with the photos in her hand, wanting to know how they had turned out. Greeted by her dog at the front door, she walked over to the table and grabbed her gold letter opener. She lifted out the photos and looked at them in horror. The picture was the photo that she had taken the sunrise. However, at the end of the road, where there should have been nothing, like there was when the picture had been taken, Joan Blake saw herself standing at the end of the road with gnarled arms and hands and an eerie artificial smile. She stared at the picture with utter terror, not knowing what to do. She looked at the other pictures. They were the same sinister smile and arms that every small child makes when they want to scare someone, arched just below shoulder length with gnarled bent fingers. Joan Blake, perplexed, walked upstairs, went to bed and never woke up. A peaceful end to a life tinged with murderous rage. There is a church in the small town just outside of Avignon, France, known as the La Dames Blanche Cathedral. The cathedral is the largest building in town, and due to the well-kept regal appearance, it has become a must-see for tourists passing through. The attraction remains very popular, despite the townspeople's fears surrounding the pipe organ on the second floor, and the organist who plays it. The second floor isn't used, and not much is up there. Not long after the church was built, a priest noticed that there was only one window on the second floor. And it was the only one in the whole church that wasn't stained glass. It was an old, dirty round window, about 3 feet around, and was near enough to the dusty and dilapidated organ that one could sit to play the organ and see out of the window. One of the priests went towards the window to see if it could be easy to remove and replaced. As he got close to the organ, the wood below him broke and he fell through the floor, and the heavy cushioning of the pews below him broke his fall. He survived, but was paralyzed from the neck down. They sealed up the room, boarded up the floor, and left everything on the second floor as it was. The priest insists that the organ not be left up there, as it was dangerous to leave something that big and heavy in such a high place, with risk of the weight of the instrument causing the wooden floor it rests on to break and crush churchgoers below. He requested this too late, however, as it was made nearly impossible to get back and to get to the instrument. It was 3 years after the church was built that the small town started to grow in population. More and more people attended service at the cathedral. Weddings were held there twice a month. This is also the same time that nuns would claim to hear organ music being played in the middle of the night. The priests dismissed it, as the second floor where the organ stayed had been sealed off for long enough that it should be too covered in dust and grime to work properly. The nuns stuck with their claims, and it wasn't until that Sunday service that the priests believed them. There was the body of a man found near the church, within earshot of the window on the second floor. His eardrums had burst, and his ears were bloody. He had marks down the side of his face that look as though he was trying to tear out his own ears, which were overstuffed with cloth. The coroner at the scene assumed the death was probably accidental. It had been raining the night before, and the man probably tripped and hit his head on the pavement. The sudden impact is what caused his eardrums to burst, and in a last-ditch effort, he plugged his ears due to try and stop the bleeding. Many of the townspeople were not satisfied with this, but did not question it. The following night, a similar death happened to a woman on her way home from the store. She died in a similar spot, near the church, within earshot of the window on the second floor. As it did not rain that night, they could not claim this one to be an accident. The third night, an old beggar woman, unkempt and unsightly, made a huge fuss, getting the attention of anyone who would listen, that there was someone in the second-story window, sitting at the organ and playing music. No one else could hear the music but the woman. She danced in the street to the song. The police told her if she wanted to make a fool of herself to do so elsewhere. She told them she would stop dancing when the pretty music stopped playing. The music did not stop. The woman had stopped dancing hours ago, exhausted. The song still rang in her ears. She covered them with her hands and moved herself to the far end of town. If she were away from the church, she couldn't hear the tune, she thought to herself. 3 more days she heard it, never stopping. She returned to the church, and went inside. She begged the priest and the nuns to make the organist stop playing the song. They told her there was no organ player. She pleaded with them a bit more before they had to escort her out. She was in tears at this point, ripping out clumps of her hair. The following morning, the police found the poor old woman, still on the grounds of the cathedral, directly below the window on the second store. There was a patch of blood staining the gray bricks on the wall. It looked as though she had smashed her head against the wall, numerous times. One of the priests says he heard her there, yelling at the window upstairs. But he disregarded her as it was the middle of the night and then her angry rant stopped by the time he had gotten outside. The body was cleaned up and the police started to worry about the threat of a serial killer. They requested the cathedral be closed off for today so it could be investigated. The head priest agreed. When they investigated the stairs leading up to the second floor, they found them loose, and able to be pried off with a crowbar. Officers Altier, Martin, and Rosamund were chosen to investigate the upper floors. They said the floorboards were too worn down for someone to be walking around. Everything was covered in dust. Officer Altier pressed a few keys on the organ sitting alone in the room. Dust spewed from the pipe related to that note, but no sound came out. The window beside the organ was very dirty and the officers could barely see out of it. They left the second story and said there was nothing suspicious about it, aside from the loose boards blocking off the stairs. The following day, the wife of Officer Altier awoke to find her husband's body in the bed with her. His eardrums burst and bloody, staining the pillow his head rested on. His eyes were rolled back in his head, and his hands were pressed against his ears. People were afraid to go to church. The nuns stayed in the inn nearby, refusing to sleep in the hotel. The priests stayed in the smaller church the next town over. Police blocked off the entrance to the church, and had covered the window on the second floor. Alternate routes were made so nobody had to walk in front of the gates. They questioned anyone in town that knew how to play an organ. One man broke into the church and smashed up the organ. Children threw rocks at the window. They did everything in their power to make sure this stopped. It did not stop. In fact, it got worse. One person dying outside the gates of the cathedral grew to 5. 3 shop owners near the church jumped from the roofs of their stores. 8 people were driven mad, one even almost drowned trying to block her ears out with river rocks. Each new person who said they heard the music no one else did stated that the man in the window was angry. They said he could see them, even without the window. He filled their thoughts. They could only think of organist, playing his tune, staring not at his sheet music, but directly at them. His eyes, cold and uncaring, did not blink, and lacked any hint of remorse or sympathy for the people begging at his feet. His fingers were thin and skeleton-like. He did not speak to them. He would not stop playing. My dad has always been a nice person, making a living for my mom and I by painting houses, with the occasional construction work. However, it recently became a difficulty after he had a heart attack a month ago due to him always using to eat junk food. As a result, he tends to be around the house more, as his doctor recommended. He is a very nice man, always being able to make people laugh, minus the occasional stubbornness, but he always had a weird quirk that he did since we moved into our house. Every day, right before it complete gets dark outside, he always looks out my window. See, we live in a house where the woods of New York is our backyard, and my room happens to have a window showing a perfect view of the woods. So if you want to see the woods, you need to look out of my window. So each evening, I am greeted by my father looking out of it. He never tells me why though, simply looking out for about 5-10 seconds, then leaving my room, off to watch TV or lay down. I always wondered why he did this though. No one can come from the backyard, save for maybe a deer, raccoon, or any other animal you expect to find in the woods. As a result, I decided to take a crack at it one day. So while my dad was watching an episode of Cops in the living room, I let him know that I would check the window for him. My dad though for a few seconds, then gave me the thumbs up. So now I can finally see just what the hell is making my dad so paranoid for the past 6 months. When it came to 6 p.m., the time my dad usually checked the window, I went to my room, and decided to take a peek out of my window. Nothing peculiar, just the same old plethora of trees, wrapping our house with their arms of wood. Seeing that my work was done, I decided to just report to my dad if it be nothing wrong. But just as I was about to turn away, I could have sworn I saw something go into the woods, a pale dot thing crawl back into the overgrowth of pines. I couldn't let my dad know about this. He would throw a fit or even have another heart attack. So when he asked if there was anything wrong, I lied that there was nothing. Surely there wasn't a possible unholy abomination outside our house. So the next day, I decided to quell my paranoia with DeviantArt and YouTube. But it was not very effective. I kept thinking, what was that thing? Surely it could have been an albino deer, but its eyes would have shined when I saw it. What I saw was only white legs retreating into the pines. Humanoid legs. To tell my dad, or not to tell my dad? That is the question. Feeling thirsty, I decided to go to the living room for a drink of water. After getting a cup of water, I checked the newspaper that happened to be on the table. The headline almost made me spit my drink. Man mutilated in own home. Apparently our neighbor's body was found mangled in his bedroom by his wife after she returned from the bar. People suspected a homicide, but the marks on his body were like an animal's, and the doors were closed. As a result, the police ruled it a cold case. Maybe what I saw last night was the killer? It might have wanted to attack my family, but since I noticed it, it attacked easier prey. As a result, I needed to make sure we were safe. My dad has to work extra late today, and I was going to the movies with my friends. As a result, no one would watch the window. As a result, I asked my mom if she can check my window later tonight. Knowing Dad's quirk, she agreed to my request. Now I would be able to go to the movies knowing my house was safe. So when my friends picked me up, I had no signs of dread. I came back home at 9:17. The movie was very good, it being a horror flick. I unlocked the door, and entered my house. But all the lights were off, and there was a disgusting odor that nearly made me gag. A mix of blood and feces. Wondering what the hell was in the house with my mom, I went to the kitchen and opened the drawer. My dad always kept a spare handgun under the knives, in case there was ever an intruder. Well, even though I was only 15 and never held a gun in my life, not even a BB, this gun would finally be used. But my moment of safety was shattered when I heard a ragged breathing noise coming from my mother's room. Taking the gun into my right hand, I slowly walked into my mom's room, where the thing I saw would probably be. As I looked into the room, what I saw would stay embedded into my nightmares. My mom, on the floor in a limp state, the thing on top of her. Now I can finally see what it was. It was about a head taller than me, probably bigger due to it being crouched down and its back facing me. It was naked, being ghost white, a gray in the dark. The breathing was sickly, similar to what you would hear from a heavy smoker mixed with that woman from The Grudge. Between my mother were two sharp rake-like claws, probably ready to hit its prey. I then coughed, the most dumbest thing I would probably do. The thing then turned its neck an unnatural angle, almost turning completely towards me. Remember how I said deer's eyes glowed? Well, this thing's eyes were black, all pupil, like empty pits starting into my soul. It had no nose, resembling a skeleton's nasal cavity. Its mouth looked like it was partially melted, pale skin being where its teeth should have been. The mouth was also in a permanent smile, as if it was mocking me. Knowing I was a threat, it began to walk towards me on all fours, resembling a human acting as a dog. Remembering the bathroom being the only locked room in the house besides the front door, I made a run for it. The thing then followed, never making any noise except for that infernal breathing. Somehow, I was able to get to the bathroom door. As I closed the door and turned the lock, I quickly pulled out my cell phone, the thing now beginning to bang on the door. I dialed 911, telling the operator how there I was being my mom being unconscious and myself almost getting attacked by a creature. After being told the police and ambulance were on their way, I prepared the gun in my other hand. As soon as I had both of my hands on the gun, the thing made a hole in the door, its cadaver of a face silently grinning at me, now producing a fusion of a growling dog and a growling human. Knowing it can be my one chance, I shot it. Emitting an abrupt screech, it fell on the floor, limp just like my mother, a bloody hole where its heart would have been. Hearing the police sirens come, I ran to the front door, feeling a sense of relief, knowing that my mother and I were not dead. But as the ambulance took my mother and I saw through the bathroom window something that was impossible. The thing was gone, only a trail of blood where its body used to be. I live in Norway, and I enjoy viewing things under my microscope. The ability to see things so small and far from human reach intrigues me. Yesterday I was looking at the plant cells from a leaf I found on the street. Within the cells of the leaf I could see the vacuoles, the chloroplasts, the cell wall, and at the center, the nucleus. It was like the center of its own little universe. I zoomed out to check on another cell, but suddenly zoomed out way too far. It was like the sensitivity of the dial was turned up to max. I was looking at myself through the microscope. I looked above me to see if there was a camera videotaping me as if this was some sort of prank, but found none. I looked back through the microscope and still saw myself sitting in my chair. In my home, in real time. My breathing was synchronized with the image of me in the microscope. Usually the microscope I use stops zooming in or out after 5 or 6 rotations of the dial. But I zoomed out and dial kept rotating until first I saw my neighborhood, then the country, and shortly after that, the entire Scandinavia. I am at this point perplexed, more than I have ever been or ever will be in my life, but I'm only human. My curiosity gets the better of me, so I keep rotating the dial. I see the Earth first after the first rotation. Then I see the solar system after another rotation, the Milky Way, another and another and another until I reach the galaxy cluster. I keep zooming out into the cosmos and now find myself viewing a cluster of galaxy clusters. Half a rotation of the dial brings me millions of light years more than science will be able to see, and the speed of zoom is rising exponentially. My journey through the universe felt so short, but when I looked up to see my clock, 30 minutes had already passed. I begrudgingly looked back into my microscope, hoping my scientific breakthrough was not simply an illusion. However, when my eyes finally adjusted to the lighting inside the microscope, I noticed something out of place. I saw a line, a border impossibly big that it surrounded our entire universe-like wall. I turned the dial another half rotation. I now see many rectangles huddled together. They all look the same, like cells in a leaf, but there are some other circular blobs displayed in the microscope. As one of these blobs moved towards a dimension like ours, it ate the dimension like a defensive cell eats an invading bacteria or fungi, or parasite. My eye, glued to the microscope, I suddenly realize of our universe's fate. It motivates me to get this cosmic journey over with. I keep zooming out. The dial stops turning and I am once again zoomed in on the familiar leaf that I picked up on the road earlier that day.